It's a challenge because I have to try to catch your attention on a topic which is not in the center of your activity. And even more, I shall say it's a topic you are not connected with. And I shall even say more, the only way that you are connected with is with symbols like forgery, bad numbers, what else? Bubble, whatever. What I will try to do is to try to explain that perhaps there is something else in China. And try to explain it, and you will see that there is something else. But I would like to give you at least one number which is unquestionable, is this one. Art in America, there was the Biennale Venice now, okay? And in the Biennale Venice, you had 350 Chinese artists represented, compared to only 150 artists from 38 countries. And just you have to imagine that the first time China was in the Biennale was in 2005. So imagine what happened between 2005 and 2013. This number is unquestionable. The rest can be totally questionable. So what is interesting is art is one of the mirror of the society. But in the case of China, is even more than that. Art is in the society. And you cannot understand China without understanding the society. But I want to tell you something, a kind of disclaimer. The more I go to China, the more I know one thing, is I don't know China. China is another culture. China is another world. So what I'm going to tell you today is just my point of view. Okay? So let's try to go behind the art market, and let's try to see what's happening. Behind the art market, the first thing you have is a kind of, you have an ecosystem, a very complicated ecosystem, especially when you speak of a country which is an emerging country. But what is important for me is to try to make this presentation agreeable. And to do it, I will do it in the way of a kind of menu degustation. Because I cannot make a full course dinner or service on China in 40 minutes. So I will choose a certain number of subjects and give you on a certain number of subjects some key ideas about what's happening there. And I will begin with the artist, because artists are the king, or normally should be the king in the art scene. And I want to begin with a very interesting interview of Xu Bing. Xu Bing is now the director of CAFA. CAFA is the most important fine art school in China. And what Xu Bing said in this interview. First, he spoke about the relation between the Western people and the Chinese. And it's very interesting is that what he said was that before 1980s, China was a place of artistic fermented, but the Western culture was very important. Especially was very important through books. A lot of books were translated in Chinese. Then after the Chinese artists, when 1985, they wanted to emancipate themselves. And they used the West to emancipate themselves. Because you must know something very interesting in China, in Chinese culture. Chinese people are pragmatic. You can be Buddhist and Taoist in China. What is important is what you do and the result. And then after 1985, and certainly after 2000, they really want to cut with the Western culture. And so this is very important, is that you have now a kind of love and hate game between China and the West in terms of the culture. The only thing also what is interesting in his interview, when he spent a lot of time in the United States, And what he said, the greatest reward of his Western experience, he feels now that he becomes more sensitive to Chinese culture. So also you have to understand, Chinese people are deeply Chinese. Deeply Chinese. And you see it with how the diaspora in China is reacting with mainland China. This is a very important point for the market, then we'll discuss. And there is something very interesting. Also in his interview, he said, we cannot make plans, he says, with the vehemence of someone whose life has taught that the fruits of talent, inspiration, hard work, and success can all vanish in an instant. What happened next is up to fate. This is very important in terms that you will see that even the Chinese artists, they don't have a long view of things because they never know what happened tomorrow. And I will take you a very good example is Ai Weiwei. Ai Weiwei is a very symbolic example here. Ai Weiwei is considered as the most important activist. And for everybody here, Ai Weiwei is only about censorship. But it's about censorship, but it's more than that. And he was put in jail because at the time it was the government was fearing the Middle East, what we call the Jasmine Revolution, will come to China. And so for them, Ai Weiwei was very dangerous because of that. And because of that, they put him in jail. It was not about censorship. It was about the fact that they were very afraid of the result of Ai Weiwei. And why he was put out of jail, not because of the Western pressure. They don't care of the Western pressure. Look at the Nobel Prize of Peace, he's still in jail. It's because at a certain time, the real explanation lies elsewhere, in Chinese domestic politics. Ai Weiwei's incarceration was a direct expression of the battle being waged in Beijing over who gets the rule of the country in the coming years. It was the famous battle between Bushulai and the new government. And Ai Weiwei was just among this battle. Nothing to do with censorship. Nothing to do with the West. Nothing to do. So, you see, this is an example of how the culture, the politics of China is intervening in art. Now I would like to speak about a very famous work which which was just become one of the most expensive work in this time. Just I want to show you something very interesting about the relation between the West and the East. Look at that. You see the golden, sorry. This means Judah had a golden tie. Golden tie means Western. So you see, Ai Weiwei, you see Zhang Fenzhe with all the young youth pioneer, and the bad guy is the Western guy. But what is very interesting is to know that today Zhang Fenzhe is supported by Gagosian, Pinault, and the others. So this is also something very interesting, is that in China, they are very pragmatic. What was the reaction in China? Because it was, for me, when there was this record, first thing I read the People's Daily. To tell you the truth, I began my day every day by reading the Wall Street Journal and the People's Daily. And it's very interesting to see how the same events can be seen in different parts of the world. And what was the reaction in China about this record? This record caused a lot of discussion in China. So what I've done, I called my friends in China and said, oh, are you happy you have a new record? Most of them told me, it doesn't concern Zhang Fenzhe. It's only a game between the West people. So this is also very interesting, that for the Chinese people, this kind of record is nothing to do with them. What is also very interesting is that what they said in the Daily People is they said that this record was only possible because he has made exhibition internationally. And this is also a very important point for what I will going to tell you after, is that Chinese artists want to be recognized outside. So you will see many of them are looking for galleries outside. And what is also very special to China is that many of the works selected by the collectors are only collected because they know the artist. Friendship in China, networking in China is something crucial. Who is the champion? Who is the guy who has made this record? This guy is Zhang Yimou. I don't know how many people know him, but I will show you something very interesting in terms of the market. Look at his market compared to the market of Murakami. It's interesting. Murakami, between 2002 and 2011, he made 152 works were sold in auction for 55 million. In the same period, Zhang Yimou, for 160 works, he made 112 million, the double of Murakami. So when we say that Chinese is just a bubble, I'm not sure that it's a bubble, because it's much more solid than people can think. And what is very interesting about this is that Zhang Yimou has not had very important exhibition in museums. So there is no validation coming from the museum. The only big exhibition he had in museum is now in the musée at Paris, Musée d'Art Moderne. So this is also very special to China because the art system is not established. People don't believe the museums to make their mind about the validity of an artist or not. They believe the market. Let's speak of the galleries. First gallery, its space. Its space is big, and a lot of galleries are big, very big. But also you have in China very small galleries. And to give you an example, this is Vitamine, which is a very small gallery in Guangzhou. And this gallery, to give you an example, is in Art Basel, FIAC, and Frieze. It means that also in China, quality is not just with big. There is a lot of art spaces in China doing an incredible work, which is not with the same as Pace or the big galleries. You have an incredible diversity of art spaces in China. Incredible diversity. And this makes also something very interesting in China is that today everything is very diverse in terms of art space and galleries. What is interesting also is that most of the galleries are not acting like you. Most of the galleries are just selling points. It means that for them, what is important is not only, I don't know how I can tell it, to mature an artist, but it's really to sell. But also, why it's like this? Because artists do not really give exclusivity to the galleries. So it's a system where, as I say, very pragmatic system. If I need you, I come to you. If you need me, you come to me. But this is changing. This is changing because now the artists are looking what's happening with the Western galleries, and especially with the artists which has been Chinese artists, which are now in the Western galleries. And when they are in the Western galleries, they have to abide with the laws and the rules of the Western galleries. So now, more and more artists in China, they want to be exclusive. And more galleries in China want exclusive contracts with the gallery. But it's still an open game. The collectors. You had, let us say, the Chinese art was can I say, the Chinese contemporary art survived because there was Western collectors. And the most famous one is Uli Zieg. Uli Zieg, he can have the smile, you know. He's now becoming a legend, and but he deserves to be a legend. You know, what they've done at this time, you know, it was really courageous. It was a real collector, you know. They were there. Chinese cannot even have money to travel or to live, and they were giving them money. Ullens was doing the same thing, and other Western collectors. So these people were in the beginning, because now things I will show you has changed a lot. In the beginning, they were the people who really supported the Chinese contemporary art. It was the period of love. Why did we collect Chinese contemporary art? That's a good question. I'm going to a more personal collector, which is me. I think that the first thing is when we went in 2005 in China, we had a shock. A shock. I don't know how many people there have been to China. But when you arrive and you see what's happening in front of your eyes, how the city, we're in Shanghai, this kind of speed, scale, energy of the transformation of the city, you know, you are really shocked. And with my wife, with Dominique, we said, you know, art is one of the mirrors for society. Let's try to find the energy that we can see in the art. So this is how we begin the collection. Then we come back to Paris, and it was really, okay, we want to make a collection, but how to make a Chinese collection? We don't speak the language. It's 12,000 kilometers from Paris. There is no institutional validation. There are no really good galleries, and the market is crazy. So that's fun. That's what I call an adventure. And so we decided, we had the chance to meet Chinese artists in Paris. So we went to them and we said, okay, we want to make a Chinese collection. And they said, okay, what type of collection? I said, a museum type of collection. The only reason we want to make a museum type of collection is that at this time there was very few, even today, very few museum type collection. People were just collecting to decorate their walls. So with these two persons, Martina and Yan Zhexiang, we begin with them to go from artist to artist. And the other way we did the collection with Lawrence, has a gallery in Shanghai. So this is something also very interesting in China. You cannot do anything without what we call guanji, networking. And the collection was made with the use of a Chinese guanji. Now it's a little bit different, but in the beginning it was just going from one people to another. So what the other reason that we collect Chinese art is because it's very unique. And I would like you to listen to the point of view of Am Glincher.
Abundance of great art in the 20th century is going to come from Asia. Just as China is the future, their art is the future. They have a narrative to tell that's quite fantastic. The Western narrative, to the greatest extent, is over. The Chinese narrative is just beginning.
And this is in terms of the artistic tradition or in terms of power? Or?
It's in terms of the artistic vision. There are young artists who are mostly involved in installation and in performance and in video that just would knock your socks off. And I'm not sure the West can compete. Just as, you know, a couple of years ago in the art market, when the global market slumped, people were saying, well, the Chinese bubble in art is over. You know, the Chinese art is over when China's over, and China's just beginning.
Well, it's his point of view. I'm sure that everybody does not agree with that, but I think it's not a stupid point of view. What is interesting also is the other reason that we have collected Chinese art is naturally about the potential of the market. And why the potential of the market? I'm not speaking of numbers. I just look at history. And you see that if you look at history, history teaches that art follows money, art follows power. And I don't know if art's going up, it's going down, it's whatever. The trend is very clear. I don't know when it will be up, but the trend is very clear. Who are the famous Chinese collectors? This is a kind of abstract word for many people. Everybody is looking for a Chinese collector. So who are they? And there is a new generation of Chinese collectors. And they are coming from the Chinese diaspora, but also from Chinese mainland. The biggest, the most well-known now, most famous one, is Buditek. Buditek is the king of the chicken in Indonesia. And he's building an incredible Chinese collection. But now he's moving a little bit on Western art, because his model is François Pinault. The other one, the most interesting one, is also Zhang Wei, the woman. Zhang Wei, this is her museum in Shanghai. She has spent $350 million in 2 years. What I want to tell you is Chinese people are deep pocket. And if they decide to do something, they put the energy and the money to do it. But now I want to humanize this idea of a Chinese collector by showing you one Chinese collector.
Welcome to the home of one of China's biggest contemporary art collectors. Businessman Zhang Yimou has spent a decade amassing more than 800 pieces, many of them highly sought after. A quarter of his hoard is kept in storage due to a lack of space in his Beijing mansion, and once he's bought a piece, he never wants to sell.
Today, even if the economy is at an all-time low, I won't try to sell any of it because I think collecting art for oneself is very important. It represents one's appreciation of beauty and aesthetics.
Zhang made his money as a telecommunications entrepreneur. He is now part of a group of wealthy Chinese who dominate the domestic art market. A few years ago, he was one of 5 mainland collectors who bought half of the most expensive contemporary artworks auctioned over a 3-year period.
What is interesting, first, Zhang Wei spent 2 years in prison. It was, I said in the beginning, in China, it's a question of fate. He was accused of bribery. Okay. So this is also very interesting, is that also in China, you never know. What is interesting, you've seen his home. It's like Guggenheim. They are very inspired by the West. And when you go there, it's something like a 2,000 square meter home in the center. It's not a home, it's a house in the suburb of Beijing, and it's quite impressive. What is very interesting is also how the Chinese collectors are supporting their artists. And the very good example is what happened with the family Ho. The family Liu in Hong Kong, they have donated $10 million to the Guggenheim, but only one condition. They have to commission works from artists born in mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, or mainland, or Macau. So this is also a way that how the Chinese collectors are supporting their art scene. By doing a lot of money, there is now a certain number of big exhibitions in the Met and wherever. There was an exhibition here in Santa Monica. And either they are paid or funded by the government, or that they are funded by private people. That, for instance, the one, for Zhang Fengzhe's exhibition in Paris is totally funded by Buditek. He has put $1 million just to have Zhang Fengzhe exhibited in the Musée d'Art Moderne. What do Chinese collectors buy? I think this is very interesting data. What do they buy? They buy mainly antiques, paintings. They buy oil painting. They buy porcelain. Oil painting is only 11%. Oil painting is very short. The rest is mostly about relics or antiques. It's very important. I will tell you why. Where are the locations where they buy? Mostly in China, 45% in Beijing. In Hong Kong, only 18%. So what is interesting is that I will speak a little bit more a little bit later, but you know that Christie and Sotheby have been authorized to make sales in China. But the authorization is, they open the door, but they open the door, a very small opening of the door, because they cannot sell anything before 1949. So you see that their market is very limited in China, because they are restricted, whatever is 1949. And on the other hand, the Chinese galleries are going to Hong Kong. Why they are going to Hong Kong? Because in Hong Kong, as you can see, the price, medium price of what is sold is much higher than what is sold in Beijing. So they are trying to attract in Hong Kong, especially the Taiwanese and the other guys that they cannot attract in Beijing. So this is also, you can understand in China what's happening in terms of what they're buying. How do the Chinese collectors buy? And there was a very interesting article of Adam Lindemann, which was made just after the art fair of Hong Kong. And he made a very interesting analysis of how the Chinese are buying. What is interesting first is that Chinese society is emerging from 60 years of communism. And what they want art to make them money. Sorry. If art can make them money, they will pay attention. But they have no patience for Western art markets taboo about buying for resale or its dealer moralistic credo against the flipping of artworks. The tacit prohibition against selling primary works at auction is contrary to the very nature of Chinese people. In fact, they want auction. They want auction because they love to gamble. They love to gamble. So you know, it's good, it's bad, but you cannot judge them. Every culture is different. And if you want to go to China, you have to play the rules of the Chinese people. So I tell for the people here in the galleries who want to do something with China, you have to adapt to the Chinese people. Otherwise, you are not obliged to do it. But it's very important, this idea of gambling, this idea of money. But also it's very interesting because as a collector, I'll tell you why after. It's an incredible time to collect works today. How can we foresee the future? The Economist said the Chinese people are the new Medicis. Very interesting, you know. About art, it's interesting. We had the period of the Japanese, then we had the period of the Russian, then we have the period of the Arabs, now it's the period of the Chinese. Okay. An example of the period of the Chinese. They just bought this famous painting a few days ago, and they saved the Creuset sale. They saved the Creuset sale. It's not the Western people, it's the Chinese people. But what is interesting, what was the reaction in China with that? People in China were very angry, because they said Wanda has shocked Chinese art collectors, and especially netizens. There was a lot of talks on the blogs, because they said that he paid double the price. And the company had to make an official statement explaining why. So this is also a part of the game between Chinese love and hate games with the Western. Why Chinese will buy Western art? You have 2 points of view. The first point of view is people like Christie's or Gagosian. They say there is a kind of globalization of taste, and so they will do like all over the world people are doing. They will buy Western art. And somebody else will tell you, it's not at all the truth, especially one of the specialists in Bonhams. They say, You know, China was never influenced by other countries. It's really the Middle Kingdom. They only had 2 or 3 invasions. And they said that Chinese people are too much culture about China, and they have a lot to do with the Chinese than to begin to collect the Western world. I was discussing this with somebody from Christie's, and I said, what do you think? I think it will be a margin of Western collectors who will buy Chinese art. And her answer was very simple. She said to me, you know, margin in China could be a big number. It's true. This is also very interesting, is that Chinese collectors, they don't want to follow our cues. They want to have, in terms of collecting, their own taste, their own model. And so you have very, very few Chinese collectors having Western advisors. Naturally, we come to the auction houses. To make it simple, you have a lot of hundreds and hundreds of auction houses in China, but the main 4 auction houses are in the west you have Sotheby's and Christie's, and the other you have China Guardian and Poly. You must remember that the first auction house in China was China Guardian in 1994. Once again, you have to compare with Christie, which was created in the 18th century. So you cannot ask them to do what has been done, what has taken 2 centuries to be done in the West. So I will take a very good example and I will compare Christie's with Poly. And you will see why Poly is the people army. Let's first listen to Christie and what Christie thinks about the Chinese market.
There's been significant growth in Asia. Asian art sales grew by almost 30% last year at Christie's. There was a 15% increase in buyers from Asia. Asian buyers represent a quarter of all our registrants for all our sales globally in Christie's now. So I think we're well on the way to being up there with London and New York.
And how much have online sales increased, and is that the way forward?
I think it's one of the ways forward. Because what we're trying to do is having 3 ways forward. There are traditional auctions, there's online auctions, and also there are private sales. I mean, online auctions are great because they give people time and have an opportunity to bid from home. And the other thing we found about online sales is it's really increased the number of new buyers coming in. Something like 50% of all the buyers on online sales are new to Christie's.
And is there interest among Asian buyers to buy online rather than be physically on the auction floor?
There's a lot of interest. We had our pilot sale of Chinese works of art, for example, over the summer, over July. And there was significant bidding from Asia. We are opening our sales in Shanghai. You know, it's the first time that a foreign auction house has been able to have auctions on their own in China. So we're opening in Shanghai, and there's going to be an online component to that. So we shall see, but I think we're very confident that there's going to be a lot of interest from Asia in online sales.
And how significant is China as an auction market?
It's big. I mean, the number of Chinese buyers at Christie's has doubled in the last 5 years, and they continue to grow. And there's a huge opportunity because people, I think, have been focused, you know, on Beijing, Shanghai, but all the 2nd and 3rd tier cities as well are there. There's a big reservoir of buyers and interest.
So what is interesting is 3 points on this interview. 25% of Christie's buyers now are from Asia. The importance of the online sale and the reservoir in China is existing because there is a lot of cities a part of Beijing and Shanghai. This is why they wanted to enter into the market, even if the door is only open smallly. This is why Christie's and Sotheby wanted to enter into the market. So let's speak of Poly. Poly is an incredible company. Poly Auction belongs to the Poly Group. Poly Group is not the state, it's the Army Liberation People. And Poly is a $40 billion asset company. 40 billion asset company. And what they want is to go global. And what is interesting is what is their state of mind in this situation. It's very interesting to look at that. What they say, they consider themselves like in 1942, where the West people are like the Kuomintang, and they are the Communist Party. So it shows you a little bit what is the state of mind of Poli today. So let us compare what are the advantage or what they are selling in terms of concept, Christie's and Poli. Poli is very simple. He said, we are Chinese, we understand Chinese, people will come to us. That's it. Very simple. And what Christie said, no, we have a chance in China because we have the experience and we are considered as being, being capable to install concepts like authentication and like, clear clients paying whatever, all the Christie's, Christie's, let us say, features. But what I want to show you something much more interesting, coming to what Noah said, and also to what Claire said. You know, why China has opened its market to foreign auction houses? It's very simple. Naturally, this is something that you have to read. It's the article in the New York Times on what's happening today in China in terms. But what is very interesting is that the government has the will to clean the Chinese art market industry in order to create a new market based on international standard values. This is the will of the government. And why they've done this? Look at what the head of Chinese auction say. Bringing the Western auction houses was like putting a crocodile in a pond. It makes the fish swim faster. So if we were in France, we had a government who will rule more 100 law more to try to regulate the things. In China, it's not at all like this. And I will give you another example, which is totally Chinese in their way to do. You know when eBay went to China in 2000. And then after, in 2004, Alibaba was created. And Alibaba was allowed to create a kind of PayPal that was not allowed eBay. Today, in 2013, Alibaba has the turnover of eBay plus Amazon. In 8 years. So when the Chinese government decides to make something important in terms of auction houses, they will do it. What's the future? I think that, it reminds me a quote, a very interesting quote. Somebody was asking one day to Joseph Stalin if he knows the Pope. And Joseph Stalin told him, the Pope, how many armored divisions? When you see who is Poli, when you see what is the government behind, you can understand that if the fish wants to eat the crocodile, he will do it one day. But he will wait the fish to be big. Then he will eat the crocodile. Interesting, how to succeed in China if you're a foreign auction house. It's very simple. You just give a 28 million gift to the government. It's how Christie's opened its door to China. That's very simple. So if you have $28 million, China will be happy to have you. Now, being more serious, now this is still serious, but let us, it's very important for everybody in China to relate with the government. And especially Christie is not just offering the sculpture, but they are doing a lot of things with the government, especially paying exhibition outside of Chinese artists. So this is also very important, is the key to enter into China is to look at things with the government. That naturally brings us to the influence of state. And it's also very interesting, because you will see the state has many, many hats. First, the state is very present in the art world, because it's about money and it's about power. And what is interesting, contemporary art doesn't exist as contemporary art in China. Contemporary art is a creative industry. But it's also, you will see after, it's a gift for me that is considered like a creative industry. The first thing, the government is trying to use art as a soft power. And they've dedicated even more than that. In 2011, there was a whole session of the Communist Party about how soft power should be used in the West. And it's very interesting also is to see their words. They want to become a global cultural power. They want to stand strong among the forests of the nation. They want to do something, a culture that appeals to outsiders and waste no time to occupy the emerging cultural battlefield. This is also very important. They are very pragmatic in the way they want to conquer the West. And this is why contemporary art is free under bracket. It's the more cultural sector free in China. And what they say is to ensure this occupation. So it's a kind of battle game. But this will not happen so easily. Why? Because if you want to use soft power, you have to be capable to seduct and attract the people, which is not the case today in the West. People do not like China. They are afraid of China. So the soft power will take a longer time. It will take for them, to tell you the truth, 1 generation. Because what's happening for them in their mind? More and more children are learning Chinese at school all over the world. And this generation can be linked one day with Chinese culture. Because they speak Chinese and they will go to China. And so they are foreseeing the next generation. This is for them. This is why they spend a lot of money on Confucius Center. Because they know that it will come through this way. It's also about incentive. They just opened in Shanghai a free zone to compete with Hong Kong. But it's a very interesting case. They opened a free zone, and I asked somebody, is he using the free zone? It's 2 minutes. Is using the free zone? He said no, because there is 25 pages of no. I'll go very quickly. I'll go to something which is more interesting for you. So now I would like to, it's a kind of the dessert part of this presentation, why you should represent Chinese artists. I think there's, for me, a different reason to represent Chinese, why you should be interested in Chinese artists. I think that, as I said to you, art is perceived as a creative industry. So, since art is perceived like this, and the Chinese collector are only interested by the monetary value, you can have access today at very interesting artistic value works. This will not be possible when the government will decide that art is no more a creative industry, but a culture treasure. So it's very interesting to do it. Art, as I said, is very unique. Chinese artists are looking for that. They are looking for being represented in the West. And also for me, it's a good way to link with China. Because by representing an artist, you will have a kind of link to something which is an incredible, incredible country. An incredible what's happening there. You can like it or don't like it, but you cannot neglect what's happening there in China. And by representing a Chinese artist, it will be a way for you, to be linked with that. And naturally, it's the potential of the market. How you should do it? Naturally, partnership with a Chinese gallery, directly with Chinese artists. Curators, because curators, they are not only curators, they also represent artists. Conclusion, what I wanted to say is, first, it's impossible to separate the market with the social context. Chinese market will be huge. I shall even say massive, but it will be a Chinese market for Chinese people with Chinese states playing the Chinese rules. I want to finish by myself. It's the last. I want to finish by myself because when you see something like this, when I told you that in the beginning it's an adventure in a country where I don't speak the language. To tell you the truth, when we make this collection with Dominique, from time to time we really have doubts about the end of this collection, because it's so complex to collect Chinese art that for us we look like this. We look like this. It's the quest of the impossible dream. Naturally, Dominique being, Don Quixote, I'm just Sancho Panza. But, in the other hand, I'll tell you something. Why we do it? For one reason. I think with this collection, it was a way for us to discover a new country. It's not about object. It's about an adventure. It's about discovering a new country. It's being part of an incredible, incredible transformation of a society that mankind have never seen in their life. Never. And for us, what I used to say to my students, money takes care of my body, art takes care of my soul. And I can tell you that with the ESL collection, my soul is really in good hands. I hope that this menu degustation that I've served you was enjoyable.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. You mentioned generosity before starting this presentation, and I think we also have to appreciate your own generosity, because I think you provide us with a lot of your experience. I think we can have like 5 minutes for questions and answers with Sylvain.
Hello, thank you for your talk. You were describing the different understanding of the art market in China. So I wonder if you could elaborate a bit about the role of the curators and in that market.
If they are. The definition of a curator in China is something very vague. What is a curator? In China, it's very difficult to know what is a curator, because a curator has many hats. He's a curator. He's representing some artist. He's writing critics in newspapers, so it's very difficult to understand what is a curator. But there are some very influential curators who can push some artists on the market, and I think they have a very important role, but not as curators, as promoting a certain number of artists. It's not, you cannot look at them with the definition of a curator that you have in Europe.
Yeah. After you talk that I found quite fascist, to be honest, I really don't feel like representing Chinese artists anymore. I really had the desire to do so, but now I feel a little bit less motivated. I think the whole system of corruption you are describing is quite disgusting, in my opinion. I think it's not Sancho Panza, but much more Bouvard and Pécuchet, yeah, to refer to your way of approaching this culture, which I find also interesting. And the only one thing about the content, you didn't say anything about the content of your collection, not a single word. And I would have been interested, because you speak as a collector, not as an expert of the art market, what you are collecting, how you make the artistic decisions. And the only one thing I heard was a kind of sailor tip, a Chinese narrative which is unique, an artistic vision, like the Glimcher quote you highlighted. So my question is very simple. When will you put your collection on the market?
First, I think that Belleville is not the center of the world. And no, I'll tell you. No, you know, you made a statement, I made a statement, you know. I think that Belleville is not in the center of the world, and I think that I really respect you, but I think that perhaps, just stop. If you want to speak, and after I answer to you. I think that's very easy to have this kind of very Western or very simplistic approach of a country of 5,000 years and 1,400,000,000 people. I know that you are very important, you have a very good ideas of what is the art, you have given very good, you know, a very good speech, very interesting, but I think that also you should respect the others and not have always a discourse which is very aggressive. This is my first thing. There is no fascist in China. They have another point of view. They have another way to live, and I don't think that you have to give them a lesson. That's my, no, first, the other thing, just I finish. I didn't speak of the collection because, unfortunately, my subject was about the market. I'm not concerned by the market. But I've tried to give a view of the market as, let us say, as objective as I could. I haven't described China as a paradise. I just say what's happening there. But, you know, I think what I've listened to you yesterday, I think that if I can make you just a suggestion, you have a view of the world which is very interesting. But perhaps the world is not like the one you view. And perhaps the world will never be like the one you are. You think, is it? I think the world is much more different than this kind of old political view of the bad guys and the good guys. I think it's much more complicated than that. So I respect your point of view. Perhaps I'm a fascist. That's it. Why not? Perhaps I don't know anything on China. Why not? And I told you from the beginning that I don't know anything. But I know one thing. Belleville is not the center of the world. And especially your gallery.
Sylvain, I had a little question. So I find excellent your presentation and hello?
No, pardon.
And very courageous because to make
yes, I have to be courageous.
Because to make a collection and with so much love and taking care and study country, it's really to respect. I will be very curious to look your collection, and even if you talk about the market. So my question is, you think the Chineses will be also interesting because you was speaking that they support their own people, that I find very good. That should do each country, support her own artists. You think they will be also interested in other artists, the Chineses, or it's not a big possibility? That is one question. And the second question is if you will show or you already show your collection in some museums.
You know, first I will answer to the first question. I think, as I said to you, I think that they will be interested, but in the margin. But margin can be a big number in China. Okay, they really wanted today to collect their people because they can connect with their people. It's something that they can connect, is their culture. But they can also move and from time to time buy a Picasso or something else. Okay, but it will not be a rule. And for my collection, I will tell you something. I'm very humble, Mr. Jocelyn. It's not the market. Well, okay, you should be a little bit more humble. We have just a young collection. And today for us is not about, you know, showing to show. We have to find the right time, the right place, the right message that we want to deliver to do it. Today we have decided to show it on the internet, because with internet is everybody, everywhere, every time. And especially we decided to do it because we want to share it with the Chinese people. Whatever we do it in Chinese and in English. And I can tell you that a lot of people in China are very interested by the way we collect and by what we are collecting. At least we are doing this, and it's not on the market.
Thank you very much.
I think it's that there is not enough time. I'm sorry. I know Sylvain will be glad to talk with you, but I think we need to continue with the next case study. I am really sorry. So I'd like to thank Sylvain one more time. Thank you, Sylvain. Wonderful presentation.